What is up? Welcome back to the Fit Habit Life podcast, where we cut through the noise, talk real health and fitness, sustainable fat loss, and habits that actually work. And on today's episode, I have a super special guest I'm really excited to have on the podcast. Matt, he is the co-founder of Ryze and Pure Factor Formulations supplements, both just awesome companies. I refer a lot of clients to Ryze for peptides and hormone replacement therapy, and every single person that my clients have worked with has been amazing. Like, they've had an incredible experience. I've even been on some of the calls with my clients, and it's just been a really awesome experience. I've had some not so great experiences in the past with other hormone replacement quote unquote providers. So I'm really excited to have you on. So thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on. I'm excited.
Hey, you're welcome. And so Matt is a wealth of knowledge in all functional medicine, specifically like stealth infections, like mold, heavy metals, chronic immune burden. So I thought it would be really cool to have him on to talk about that. But before we jump in to those topics, I just wanted to give Matt the floor to introduce himself and just learn a little bit, like, how did you get into this space? Because it's pretty niche. I guess like functional medicine is more buzzwordy nowadays, but not a lot of doctors actually dig in at the level that you do.
No, they don't. And, to be honest, because functional medicine is gaining popularity, there's unfortunately this area where conventional medicine doctors are claiming to offer functional medicine, but realistically, they're just prescribing LDN and glutathione, and that's not functional medicine. They still don't know how to actually interpret comprehensive blood work. They don't understand how to actually utilize deductive reasoning and common sense, as crazy as that sounds, to find root causes and dig into those root causes and remediate all the systems in the body. Because of their training, it's very focused on symptomology and reversing of symptoms. So they never actually learned how to get to the root. And so, of course, if they're not extending their education, they're just going to provide a maybe better version of conventional medicine, so to speak. But, in regards to myself, I was a online nutritionist and bodybuilding coach for about 13 years. And so I was working with very high level athletes for quite a while. And that's originally what got me intrigued with the concepts of metabolic adaptation and hormone decline. Any coach who's worked with significant amount of athletes over the years can see metabolic adaptation happening in real time. And so it made me curious. And I always tended to have my own digestive issues myself, and so did my family members. My dad ended up passing away of stage 4 esophagus cancer in 2018. That was really the wake-up call for me that, number one, I needed to get my shit together and fix my gut health. But number two, you can't trust conventional medicine worth dog shit. And so that really made me passionate about digging into my own issues. And as I found a functional medicine doctor in Charlotte, and I started connecting with online functional medicine coaches, not only was I starting to work through my own issues, but I was starting to get this whole new passion for a different type of nutrition and lifestyle strategies, supplement strategies. And it really kind of just took over for me from there. That led to me starting to do my own education and get more skilled. I did a few different mentorship programs and online courses, including the FDMP program. And from there, I kind of slowly transitioned out of the physique competition world into more of the functional health world. And you may or may not know this, but most of the physique competition world has functional health issues. At least 80% of them develop GI issues due to the stress of contest prep and stuff like that. So it ended up working itself out because a lot of my clients or colleagues' clients needed to fix their gut, needed to fix their hormones, needed to address those issues. But slowly but surely, I just started reaching more of the Gen Pop people. And then I started getting into some educational things. I started offering courses to teach other coaches how to interpret blood work and use a more root cause lens. That's where kind of I first started getting involved with clinics. And so I got brought on to be the clinical director of an online clinic. And that was going really well for a while. That was my first experience having hands-on experience with legitimate hormone therapy and legitimate peptide therapy. Me and that owner kind of had some disagreements in how we approached things. And so at that point, once I kind of made the connections, understood the back end of how a clinic operates, my partner at the time and I just decided to part ways and do our own thing. So we ended up opening Ryze at the end of 2022. And now we are here today. We have about 6,000 active patients currently, and we're very busy, whether it's servicing, the HRT space or the functional medicine space, reversing chronic disease.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad that you guys exist.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, you're welcome. I live in an area where med spas are really popular for HRT and things, and they don't do it properly, I will say, from many client experiences and stuff. And my coach referred me to Bella probably like a year ago to like send clients to, because I'm like, I've been going to the med spas, and then I got into like functional health coaching and reading labs and all of that stuff. And I was like, oh my God, I had a 70-year-old client, testosterone 1500. Yeah, and he had 2 heart attacks.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I was like, oh man, I need to find somebody. And you guys have been awesome. So I really, really appreciate it. And it's cool too, because I can be a part of the process too. And I can be on the calls and communicating with one of your providers with my client. And so it's kind of like I can't think of the word right now, but very like
sometimes it takes a village, and sometimes we incorporate a therapist in that as well. So we have someone working the nutrition and lifestyle aspects, someone working the physiological dysfunction, and someone working the psychological dysfunction, and it's all interconnected. Sometimes it does require a team of individuals, but that's kind of been our purpose. Because I came from the bodybuilding and fitness space, one of my first initial passions to opening the clinic was to kind of bridge that gap and open up that communication, because especially competitors who are taking PEDs and stuff, they have to lie to doctors to not be judged or ridiculed or have anything written up on their medical information for health insurance and stuff. So they basically lie. And how can you get good health care if you're lying about what you're doing? So there's just an automatic distrust, whether it's a matter of just not trusting the education of the doctor or just not being willing to open up to that doctor. So we wanted to open up that and bridge that gap so that athletes, Gen Pop people felt comfortable being completely honest and open with their specialist or physician. And also at the same time, making sure that everyone at the clinic is using that root cause deductive reasoning approach and not just pushing unnecessary supplements, peptides, hormones, always using minimal effective dosaging. And so that's the practices that we've wanted to incorporate. And that's why we've basically collaborated with, I think we have close to 70 different coaching teams or coaches like yourself that we work with to be that middleman. And the thing we've talked about this, I always say, whether it's Pure Factor or Ryze, our goal is to support you as the coach. And so if the coach wants to be involved, great, that's even better, so that we can all be on the same page. And as long as the patient is okay sharing that medical information and allowing the coach, which they should, it typically works out better that way, that we're all involved in communicating.
Yeah. I was on a call on Friday of last week with a client, and she felt more comfortable because I was on the call with her,
Yeah.
and it just helped have that like whole collaboration thing. Like everybody's on the same page, and
Yeah.
then the client doesn't always remember everything or why the coach recommended certain things,
Yes.
or even if I were just to talk with the provider, I might not remember everything, and so my client
Sure.
being there to correct me and make sure that everything is in sync, it's just it's a better experience overall for everybody in the process.
Totally. And do you also have a trained eye and brain that a client does not? Why would we expect them to? So sometimes, even if we were on a call with a client and I said, well, tell me how you're feeling, tell me about your symptoms, and they say, well, overall, I'm okay. You could be like, hold up, Janet. You don't sleep. You have bloating all the time. And you kind of have to remind them about their symptoms, because society has normalized all of our symptoms so much. Most people don't know how bad off they are, especially as we get into like our 30s or 40s. We just kind of chalk it all up to old age. And so having someone with that keen eye who is doing check-ins every week, you can highlight some things that maybe they're not even thinking about mentioning and say, well, remember how you said that you never have energy and that you're never sleeping? These are the things that they need to know, you know?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and just like because they have it all the time, they don't think that
Yeah.
it's anything out of the norm. And it's
Yeah.
like even starting with clients, if I don't explicitly say like this is what normal should feel like and what you should be like, they won't mention anything.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, cool. So, what are stealth infections? Because this is something I hadn't really heard of till
Yeah.
we met, and you helped us come up with a protocol to get rid of the mold that we have inside our bodies.
Yeah.
So,
So,
what is it? And oh, sorry, go ahead.
well, go ahead. Well, stealth infections are a very new, I guess you could say, nuanced topic in functional medicine. Majority of functional medicine isn't even there yet. And honestly, that's because, for the most part, they're just not reaching the disease enough cases to understand that, or they're still too fixated on life stress and not understanding that life stress typically is not what's causing disease and dysfunction, that it's much deeper than that, that the fact that they are exercising 5 times a week and a little overworked and drink a little bit of caffeine, that's not causing their autoimmune disease. That's gasoline on an already present fire. But gasoline on its own isn't dangerous, right? It's only dangerous when it's with fire. And so lifestyle and nutrition choices can add fuel to the fire, but they are not typically the entire piece of that puzzle. And unfortunately, I think too many people in the space are still way too fixated on that as the only problem. And so by the time people come to someone like me, they've already worked with 2 functional specialists. They've already worked with several coaches. They've done the year of deload training. They've done all the yoga and meditation. They've taken all the supplements, and they're still fucked up. And so definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Stop telling them to reduce their stress and start helping them actually find what the stressor is. And I feel like this can be even more highlighted when someone says, but I'm not stressed. My life is good. I make good money. Me and my husband have a great relationship. But their blood work and diagnostics are screaming that they're stressed. Okay, this tells us that it's internal. It's not external. And so stealth infections, we call them stealth infections because, number one, nobody knows that they have them. And number 2, the way our conventional medicine testing and health insurance is set up, we do such minimal testing for most people And it's so surface level that we're not able to catch these items most of the time. And so there's essentially 4 categories of what we consider stealth infections. There's reactivated viruses, things like Epstein-Barr, CMV, HSV, which is variations of herpes, people dealing with shingles and things of that nature. Those are all strains of reactivated viruses. And the majority of us actually have some form of viral load in our body, but it's staying dormant. And when we're having flares or reactivations, that's typically due to chronic stress and immune compromisation, allowing those viruses to flare. So when they're dormant, they're typically not causing us too much stress, but when they reactivate, they're very impactful and stressful on the body. So that's one category of stealth infections. Then we have parasites, which 20 to 25% of the population develops parasites, and parasites are very good at shedding their skin. So they can also hide from a lot of different tests, including GI maps. Even when we're testing for parasites, we may not always necessarily find them because of how good they are at hiding from our system. The third is toxic exposure. Mycotoxins, which are a toxic form of mold, heavy metals, environmental toxins, chemical toxins. And what we all have to understand is, as Americans, we all have toxins in our bodies. Our air is polluted, our water is polluted, our soil is polluted, our food is covered in pesticides and chemicals. The clothing that we wear, women with Lululemon and all their fitness clothing, it's all plastics. Everything women put on their body is basically plastic and endocrine disruptors. And then we haven't even talked about cosmetics and cleaning supplies and laundry detergents and scented candles and all these other things that are all forever chemicals impacting our bodies. And last but not least is tick-borne illness, such as Borrelia, which causes Lyme disease, or Bartonella, which causes cat scratch fever. 1/3 of the population has some form of tick-borne illness. So everyone's kind of been misinformed about how common Lyme disease is. Everyone thinks that's not possible. I've never interacted with a tick. If you go out with 2 friends, one of you has tick-borne illness. That's how common it is. 1/3 of the population, 1 out of 3.
Wow.
And so what we have to understand is that the name tick-borne illness is a misinformation campaign because it makes us believe we can only get this from ticks. But the truth of the matter is we have seen this be able to be contracted from fleas of dogs and cats and other insects, but that's not even the biggest piece. Borrelia is a spirochete bacteria very similar to syphilis, which means it can be sexually transmitted, partner to partner. It also means that pregnant mothers with Lyme disease will pass that to children in the womb, and children are being born with Lyme disease. There are far more cases than what are being reported. It is all over the U.S. So again, when states say, we don't have Lyme disease in Texas, misinformation campaigns all over the United States. And again, majority of us are impacted by one or more of these stealth infections. Stealth infections are the number 1 cause of all autoimmune disease cases, most of the metabolic disease crisis in terms of insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, PCOS, endometriosis. Almost every case of PMDD and POTS is related to mold toxicity, because we have to think we're dealing with neurological detriment, respiratory detriment, and endocrine detriment. Hello? All it takes is deductive reasoning to correlate these things. But when we zoom out the lens and we look at society, 60% of us are diseased. 80% of men can't qualify for the draft. We have more autoimmune disease than ever. We have more metabolic disease than ever. We have an infertility crisis. This isn't coincidental. Something's going on, you know?
Yeah. And I was actually going to ask, like, why do you think it's more common now than it has ever been? Is it just we're more aware? But Is it just more toxins in the environment that we're being exposed to on a regular basis?
Bingo.
Okay.
Our healthcare system is making trillions with a T, trillions off of our disease. So they have zero incentives to improve this or reverse this. Instead, they want to give 6-year-olds Ozempic. So we have to understand what their goal is and understand that it's completely different than our goal of getting healthy. But in terms of your question, why is it getting worse and worse? The best explanation is not individual, Lyme disease is getting worse, mold toxicity is getting worse. The better answer is our total allostatic load, meaning our total stress buckets, are building up higher. Pesticides are higher than ever. Chemicals are higher than ever. Stress from, life and politics and being gaslit every day. All of these things are worse, which negatively impacts our ability to detox. And it also impacts our immune system's strength to fight off these burdens. So we're immunocompromised, we're not detoxing well, and we have higher loads of chemicals and infections coming at us more than ever before. So it's kind of a combination of things. And then you add in the bad lifestyle, the bad diet, the alcohol, the no sleep, the caffeine and stimulants, the vaping, all that. Those are just icing on the cake. That's not what's causing it. It's just fuel on the fire. So it's an accumulatory effect. But
that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because like nowadays too, it's easier than ever to go and get 2,000 calories for lunch from McDonald's or whatever. I live in Utah and there's literally just all the fast food restaurants everywhere. Like we don't have a community center or a gym in my town, but we have every single fast food restaurant you could imagine.
Right. Yeah.
So the ease of access with that, less reason to do things yourself. Like you can order everything to the house. You can pay somebody to do your yard work. You sit at a desk all day, and then you sit at a desk all day inside a home that has a bunch of toxins.
Right.
Makes sense.
Yeah. It's a combination effect. And that's why even when people do try to get more sunlight, get more sleep, they see some progress, but not full progress. Even when people start with a lifestyle coach, clean up your diet, exercise 4 times a week, some progress, but not full progress. It's reducing that stress bucket, but it's only reducing it so much because the overall burden is still so high.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I've had my husband on the podcast and we've talked about his like mold issue quite a bit, or at least I have.
Yeah.
And it's that. It's like, yeah, there were some things we had to clean up. He had GI issues. He wasn't managing stress as well as he could have. He had extra body fat. But even when we addressed those problems, like he still has like chronic fatigue, low energy, ADHD like symptoms, and a bunch of other stuff. And it's like, well, what is it?
Right.
Mold.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing, the gut is a major driver to disease and dysfunction. Every hormone metabolizes and converts through the gut. So any type of GI issues is kind of automatically leading to hormone dysfunction and endocrine dysfunction. And of course, it's going to impact detoxification capability. So if you have GI issues, you probably have sluggish liver and gallbladder function. So you most likely are building up toxins faster. However, what's interesting is, yes, the gut can cause stress and it can be a major contributing factor to these issues. But the more and more I dive into this, the gut is a result of the stress, not the cause of the stress. And so, SIBO. SIBO is one of those hot topics in the past 5 years. Every woman on the planet is trying to get rid of her SIBO. And she just believes at the bottom of her heart is, if I can just take this antibiotic and get rid of this SIBO, I'll be perfect. Not realizing, why does the SIBO keep coming back? Or why can't you get rid of it? It's because you're in a chronic fight or flight state and you're not digesting food. which means undigested food is sitting and festering and developing into SIBO. So to your point, mold, tick-borne illness, reactivated viruses, toxic load, that's what's preventing digestion and nutrient absorption from happening and negatively impacting that gut microbiome, keeping people stuck and in a vicious cycle. Not all the time necessarily, but that's what I see most of the time these days.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've had another client recently. He told me, I did not know this until last week, but he's like, yeah, I did do a mold test and it said I had mold exposure, and I've lived in the same house for I know, for 12 years or 12 plus years now. And I was like, you got to get a mold guy to your house, because when we've made a lot of progress. Like, he had crippling cramps, on the floor, really crazy. But he's very wealthy, so he can afford to get his blood cleaned out and filtered every couple weeks.
Yeah.
But that's treating the symptom, because you're still getting exposed to the mold all the time, which is why you still have to get your blood cleaned out.
Absolutely.
So I'm okay.
Stopping to fill your tires with air just to keep driving over nails.
Exactly. And that's the worst part probably about mold, is because now I know what to do, and for my husband, we know what to do, but we have to wait because we own our house, and so we have to get the mold out of the house before we can actually start the treatment plan.
Correct. Yeah. But better to know than treatments are not cheap, and not just from a financial investment, a time investment, an energy and emotional investment. Treatments are tough. And almost everyone who deals with a couple treatments ends up with treatment fatigue, and then their compliance goes down, their motivation goes down. So these days, I'm always trying to let's catch everything up front so you don't have to keep coming back to me. Because if we're still talking in a year, I feel like I failed. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And last year we did a gut health protocol for 4 months, and we did everything. And after that, I was like, okay, I'm done. And I felt a lot better. Yeah. But my husband, we actually think he has mold inside of him because he was exposed as a child. So he felt kind of better, but still had some problems. But then over the year, this past year since we finished the protocol, I've gotten worse. And I'm like, what is going on? Mm-hmm. So makes sense in hindsight. But yeah, now we're ready to do another protocol. Yeah. But I would not have done one back to back and not forever. The amount of supplements you have to take, it's insane. You need a calendar, a reminder at each meal. Yeah.
Well, and years ago, the obviously the education wasn't quite there. And so my first treatments that I undergone were way more restricted than what people do these days, because there was such a fixation around food choices and low FODMAP. But it was an extreme fixation. No condiments, no seasoning. I was eating boiled chicken with yellow mustard for every meal for 6 months. And shrimp.
That sounds terrible.
Way more aggressive than what people have to do these days. And it's just because I realized we're missing the forest between the trees. The condiments isn't what's going to keep them from getting better. You know what I mean? The garlic powder isn't what's keeping them symptomatic. They're living in mold, or they have tick-borne illness, or they are living with a toxic partner who's keeping them psychologically distressed. And that does happen. Don't get me wrong. There are those cases where, one way or another, whether we're talking about stealth infections or a toxic work environment or a toxic partner, these are chronic stressors. And so I've had cases over the years where a patient is, trying to still work things out with their alcoholic, abusive husband and stuff. And unfortunately, you're only going to get so far in that type of environment. And they made a lot of progress. I would say she got 80% better. But we could tell that, there were still some hindrances. Years later, I hear from her out of the blue. I finally left that environment, left that job, left that significant other, and I feel better than I have. So it was that
Wow.
lingering issue preventing them from getting 100% there. They didn't need another treatment. They just need to finally get their stress under control.
Yeah, that's crazy. And that does happen, like you
Yeah.
said. And so that's cool that she was able to identify it and leave, because
Yeah.
those are the harder situations.
Well, especially a job, like, oh,
Yeah.
let me just stop making income.
Yeah.
That can
Yeah,
be
that's
really
tough.
stressful.
Yeah. And I've seen that too, not to probably that degree with clients, but like, unhealthy jobs or relationships or other things, and then they realize, oh, like this is part of the problem, and they leave, and then, some of their digestive symptoms go away. And it's like, yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Those were very extreme cases. And obviously, after hiring, multiple functional coaches and stuff, I think it was kind of like the writing on the wall. Like, I've done everything else. This is the one last thing that I need to do. And luckily it worked for them in that regard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad, because that, if it didn't work, that it's like you're just
Right.
oh
Right.
man. So how do you
You know,
identify which of the stealth infections it is? And are there
yeah,
like, because a lot of them have similar symptoms,
they sure
so
do.
it's hard to kind of navigate.
Sure. A lot of people have multiple stealth infections. The
Mm,
tricky thing is, pathogens and bacteria are looking at us as hosts. And so a person with bad boundaries and a dysregulated nervous system and a dysregulated immune system is an open house for infections and pathogens. And it's interesting because as I've met functional medicine colleagues over the years, everyone kind of has their own little niche and thinking processes. But some people really go down the pathway of vibration patterns. And even as part of their treatment, they're working on different vibrations in the human body. Well, what's interesting is they've correlated, again, people with bad boundaries, dysregulated nervous systems vibrate differently, and that attracts infections to them.
interesting.
So it's very common that someone with chronic Lyme disease also has reactivated viruses, EBV, for example, and also mold toxicity. And what's interesting is you can't cure the Lyme disease if they're still dealing with mold toxicity, because the mold toxicity keeps the immune system too compromised to ever successfully treat the Lyme disease. So in many of these cases, it becomes an all or nothing treatment. They can't get out of it. And so we're trying to uncover every possible rock early on, obviously, but sometimes we don't catch it till midway through the treatment. But in terms of trying to catch it early on, there is comprehensive testing you can do. You can do a toxicology test, which is a urinalysis, where we're looking at various types of mycotoxins and mold in your body. We're looking at levels of heavy metals. We're looking at the chemicals, the environmental toxins, the full picture. There's also comprehensive tick-borne illness testing. And this is very different than what they're doing in conventional medicine, because we have to understand that there's a difference between Lyme disease and tick-borne illness. There's Borrelia, which is the main bacteria that causes Lyme. But then there's 3 co-infections. There's Bartonella, Escherichia, and Babesia. So if you say, hey, I want to get tested for Lyme, they're testing you for Borrelia. You can have the other 3. And so there's pretty much no conventional medicine testing for all 4. Furthermore, tick-borne bacteria is literally so good at hiding. It burrows itself into our joints and nerves and tissue, hiding from our immune system and hiding from eradication and hiding from testing.
Wow.
So you also need to be looking at the various antibodies for all 4 infections at the same time. And most of the time, we're actually not seeing the presence of the active infection. We're seeing the antibodies. But what does that mean? If the antibodies are elevated, it means your immune system's in a search and destroy mission. It hasn't found it yet, but it's acknowledging that it's there. Unfortunately, in Western medicine, because your insurance is trying to prevent pain for you, they're not going to tell you. They're going to say, no, you don't have it. It's not there. And so it's very important that you understand when you're looking at tick-borne testing, there's a lot of context to that. Sometimes you even need to take 1 or 2 supplements to provoke the bacteria, because in chronic Lyme cases, it's so embedded that even the comprehensive testing might not pick it up. And so sometimes by taking an antiviral or anti-Lyme supplement, you tend to bring it a little bit to the surface, and that creates a much more accurate picture when you do that testing. Same thing with toxicity testing. Sometimes you include a binder with the toxicity testing, and that's binding to the toxins and bringing it into your urinary tract, which now makes the test results much more accurate. So sometimes there's little details to go with that testing to make it more accurate. But those testing through a functional medicine provider like our clinic can be very expensive. The comprehensive tick-borne testing is around $650. The toxicity testing can be around $500. These aren't cheap tests. So we're not automatically diving into those right away. Typically, we like to get comprehensive blood work where we're at least looking at all the systems. So your cardiovascular system, your lipid profile, CRP. We're looking at blood sugar and insulin resistance markers. We're looking at a full thyroid panel, not a TSH marker, included with thyroid antibodies. We're looking at, your entire endocrine system, cortisol and adrenal function. And we're obviously looking at your immune system function as well. Oftentimes some other markers like iron, ferritin, vitamin D. And sometimes we might even include different types of antibodies, ANA antibodies, CD57 panels. These are a little bit more in-depth when we kind of already know there's a immune system issue going on. But those can kind of give us a much better idea of the body as a whole and the systemic dysregulation going on. I can tell you right away, there's some red flags for self-infections on blood work. High CRP, high insulin resistance, very high cortisol, very low cortisol. I can tell you almost every case of adrenal fatigue is a self-infection. And obviously, we're going to see the endocrine disrupted from that. Most cases of tick-borne illness have iron and ferritin issues because tick-borne bacteria feeds off of iron. And so this is why so many people are anemic. And so what they have to understand is that if they do iron infusions or iron supplements, you're just feeding the infection. You're not actually fixing anything. So there's details there, and none of that is necessarily confirmation, but we're developing a list to use with deductive reasoning. Then when we take that and correlate it with their intake form, analyzing their symptoms, chronic fatigue, chronic anxiety, digestive issues, sinus and respiratory issues. When we think about mold, we're inhaling those mold spores, and those mold spores stay present in our ears, nose, throat, and lungs, and even in our brain, causing neuroinflammation. Epilepsy, vertigo, PMDD, POTS. These are mold toxicity symptoms. The sinus and respiratory, chronic allergies, chronic sinus infections, chronic ear infections, chronic fungal overgrowths, and fungal infections like candida or vaginal yeast infections. These can all be related to mold toxicity. Tick-borne illness. I mentioned earlier that tick-borne bacteria burrows itself into our joints and nerves. Almost every musculoskeletal disease that we have a label for typically relates back to tick-borne illness. Lupus,
Interesting.
rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, fibromyalgia, restless leg syndrome, neuropathy. Majority of the time, these are symptoms related to tick-borne illness. Because what's happening in the body, every case of autoimmune disease is just an overactive immune system trying to seek and destroy the burden. There's no such thing as an unexplainable phenomenon in the human body. I know our healthcare system thinks we're stupid, and they try to talk to us like, oh, your body's just confused. Actually, you're the one who's confused. Our body knows exactly what it's doing. It's been doing it for 1,000 years. It's pretty good at surviving. So what we consider as inconvenient symptoms, our body is just doing survival adaptations. So when we think about autoimmune, what are antibodies? Antibodies are soldiers of our immune system, Coast Guard and Border Patrol. Why would our government be increasing Coast Guard and Border Patrol? Because we're being invaded. Do we blame the Coast Guard and Border Patrol, or do we blame the invaders? Well, our healthcare system wants to blame the antibodies, and so that they can sell us immunosuppressant drugs for the rest of our lives. We don't want to suppress our immune systems. That's not the problem. We want to get rid of the invaders. And so, believe it or not, majority of cases of Hashimoto's are actually mold toxicity. And so let's think about what's happening there. The immune system is producing antibodies that are attacking our thyroid gland. But where's our thyroid gland? In our throat, where mold spores like to stay, our sinus and respiratory system. So over 85% of Hashimoto's that I've dealt with ends up being mold toxicity. And that's what's driving that antibody response. It's not a thyroid issue, it's an immune system issue. In cases of tick-borne illness, rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, the immune system is attacking our joints, nerves, and tendons. Why would it be doing that? Because there's bacteria in our joints, nerves, and tendons. The arthritis is the immune system attacking and the war going on in that vicinity.
That's crazy. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, like logically.
The problem with common sense is, Emma, it's not that common in our healthcare system.
That's true. Or in a lot of parts of the world nowadays, I'd say.
Yeah. When you break it all down, the body is not that confusing. You just have to learn how the systems work and then be able to put together some deductive reasoning understandings. And I'm not saying that this is 100% all the time, but once again, you get the lab markers, you get the symptomology, you put those things together, and then maybe you do a little bit more explorative testing, like a GI map. GI maps are very useful, even if they don't necessarily have a ton of standout digestive issues. Chances are we're going to see some dysregulated systems in there. Their nutrient absorption, their good bacteria, their detoxification pathways, immune system regulation, leaky gut, inflammatory responses. So most of the time with stealth infections, when we're looking at a GI map, we see it in those intestinal health markers. And that page 4 tells the whole story of what's going on in the gut and in the body in terms of the terrain. So if we have that information plus everything else we've talked about, we're putting together all the pieces.
That makes a lot of sense. So is that like step 1, usually just comprehensive blood work?
Absolutely.
Then step 2, if that helps, but you still have questions, probably GI map?
Probably. The benefit of the GI map doesn't just go from a place of discovery, it also can map out the treatment. Because again, we're in functional medicine, we're not treating the symptom, we're regulating all the systems. And so we need to see how you're absorbing nutrients. We need to see how you're detoxing. We need to see what is your immune capacity. Are you in a very overreactive state, or is your immune system super compromised because you've been dealing with this for 30 years? So what type of immune support might be needed? What type of inflammatory support might be needed? The more you can improve those systems, the more successful any type of eradication process is going to be. When you hear about people having extreme die-off symptoms or MCAS or histamine reactions, it's because they're not detoxing well, and it's because their immune system is in a too compromised inflammatory state. So the more you support those items, the smoother and more successful the rest of the treatment can be.
That's awesome, because the gut health thing we did last year, I even had like blood sugar regulation issues to where my blood sugar dropped to like 40.
Ooh,
Yeah, and I almost passed out. It was like
wow.
pretty scary. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was like playing around with a blood sugar monitor, like
Yeah.
just for fun, and I'm like, wow, I feel really lightheaded. So, yeah, well, that's good because I like the way you developed our protocol. It's like strengthen the immune system, natural detox pathways, and then you hit
Then
your
dive.
body with the, yeah.
Yes. Yes. And there's going to be other components too. Let's not forget how much adrenal function plays into this. If they are already in a very compromised state, adrenal fatigue, low cortisol, whatever you want to call it, their immune system is fucked. That nothing's happening. They're not killing infections. They're not doing anything until we can improve that adrenal capacity. So how do we do that? Well, oftentimes it's obviously reducing stress, better lifestyle choices, better diet choices. But sometimes it's things like adaptogens to reduce cortisol and stress, get them into better sleep so that they can recover and regenerate. Sometimes it's the opposite. We actually need to boost adrenal function and get their cortisol to a proper state so that everything else can work properly. The endocrine system, I wouldn't say that this directly ties in, but it indirectly ties in because there's so much immune system support, stress resilience, and metabolic benefits from having healthy sex hormones. And especially in women, there's so much adrenal compensation to having crashed hormones. I can't tell you how often I see women on certain types of birth control that crash all three sex hormones. A great example is the Mirena IUD. The Mirena IUD basically causes chemically induced menopause. It crashes all three hormones.
That was my problem actually. I lost my cycle for like 6 years,
Mm-hmm.
and I was on the Mirena IUD for like maybe 2 years ish, and then
Mm-hmm.
I found out because I doctor didn't explain anything to me. I was just like, hey, like I don't want to get pregnant, and they're
Right.
like, this is a great option. I'm like, cool, because I forget to take the pill, but also the pill is not a good thing. There's only 1 week a month that you can actually get pregnant, so when you
Exactly.
know that, do you really need this thing?
Exactly.
Probably not.
Especially with cycle trackers and stuff these days, you know.
Yeah. And it's took me 6 years to get my
Yeah.
cycle back. And then part of like me connecting the dots that, oh, I also have mold toxicity is since being in this house, my body has had, like, I've lost cycles here and there. And I'm like, I was a D1 athlete. Like, this
Yeah.
is way less stress than I was under like
Right.
before, you know?
Right.
And so I'm like, oh man, that's crazy. But anyway,
But to that point, you just brought up another good point. When we're in that discovery process, one piece that I didn't even include yet is from the practitioner or coach's standpoint, asking the right questions, knowing what to look for. So as we're talking and I'm analyzing all these symptoms, a very common, let's say you have a bunch of sinus, respiratory, GI symptoms, anxiety, sleep issues, all these fight or flight type responses. When did this all start? Oh, about 6 years ago. Okay, great. Have you changed work environments or home environments in the past 7 years? Actually, yeah, that's right when I moved into this new apartment. Once again, deductive reasoning and connecting dots and following the paper trail. We can typically find where this was sourced, whether it was past, present, current. We can even find where people developed tick-borne illness at the age of 12 and now they're 50. It's just based on occurrences that happened in their life, when certain diagnoses happened, when they started noticing things being off. And sometimes it was a couple years, sometimes it's been decades. But asking the right questions and spending a lot of time with your client or patient is a big part of that. And again, when we reflect on conventional medicine, what you're spending 5, maybe 10 minutes with a physician, they don't have the time or capacity to spend 90 minutes with someone and say, tell me about your entire life, you know?
yep. Yeah.
So it's hard.
Yeah, it is. And like there are some doctors out there they actually do care, but the
Yeah.
way that the system is built, it's like they have to see like 6+ people every hour. So
Yeah.
they can't
There's
actually put
physicians
in
that
the
I've
time.
spoken to on the podcast that see 120 people a day.
That's
That's
crazy.
Oh yeah, Emma. Oh my gosh. When you're fresh out of med school and you're a new medical doctor, the thing is the way hospitals incentivize you, you're getting paid based on how many patients you see and how many prescriptions you write. So if you were $500,000 in debt, wouldn't you try to be seeing as many people as possible to get your money back, even though you're exhausted and you're burnt out and you're just trying to help people? That's the problem with the system. The physicians are victims themselves. They don't even know it yet. But they're victims of the same system.
That's crazy. So after you figure out the problem, or like you've assumed
Yeah.
like it's probably a couple things, which
Yeah.
honestly, I think my husband, well, given symptoms and other things, he might have other things going on
Yeah.
because whenever we travel, he gets sick every time. Like it doesn't matter where we go, how long
Yeah.
we're away. His body's immune system is just super compromised.
They're compromised. Yeah.
So does it.
It'll be interesting to see how this next treatment goes, and he may end up needing some further immune system and regenerative support. That case is actually one of those cases where mitochondrial reuptake and regeneration peptides are actually beneficial, not how they're being abused by everyone and their mother these days. But
Yep.
we have to ask, well, why is the mitochondria damaged to begin with? Let's fix that first and then start working on improving the mitochondria. So that might be a case where post-treatment, there's some other regenerative tactics that he does.
That's what we were thinking. I don't know, do you know anything about like Provo Health or like Utah? There's like a lot of.
I'm familiar with Provo Health, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I had a friend who had like severe mold toxicity, like in their house, like their floorboards were all moldy, and she had, insane, like crazy symptoms, and she because of the crazy amount of damage it did to their house, and they had to pay mold remediation's very expensive. It's costing $7,000 for 2 rooms in my house, and her like whole house was remediated. So she couldn't finish the mold treatment, but she was going to a clinic and using a hyperbaric like oxygen chamber. Is that something that can help the body like actually repair mitochondria, brain health? And
Yeah, it can, absolutely. Replenishing fresh oxygen into the bloodstream has shown a lot of benefits. That's where the EBOO treatments have come in. It's kind of like cleaning out your blood and replenishing it. And people feel really good afterwards. But again, did they get rid of the burdens? Those are kind of after effects, not the fix.
okay,
They're post-treatment support items. You
okay,
still have to get to the root of it to really get better.
that makes sense. Because we were thinking once we get the mold out of the house, just to give my husband some relief, like trying the EBOO thing. Because the client I was telling you about who has mold in his house, probably, he goes monthly to get that treatment.
Yeah.
And it's like, I feel awesome afterwards. And I'm like, well,
Right.
treating a symptom.
Right. Yeah, he's got a long road ahead of him, but I'm sure you can help him.
So is your normal like treatment process like immune system, detox, adrenals, then, or does it depend on?
It depends, obviously. Not every case needs the same level of aggression and support. But in most cases, I could make an argument that everyone could use a little bit of immune system support and detox support. So it definitely depends on the case. And when we're analyzing the full picture of labs and GI math, that's kind of what's helping us decipher how aggressive we might need to be. Sometimes we include pharmaceutical peptides like injectable glutathione to really help with detoxification. Thymosin alpha-1, which is a great peptide for immune adaptability. And so it's really good for parasites and tick-borne cases to just make that immune system a real powerhouse. There's obviously anti-inflammatory items like LDN, BPC 157, TB 500, KPV, lorazepam. So there's a lot of cool pharmaceutical items we can use, but where that comes into play, honestly, is a person's budget. And this is just being totally honest, there's expenses with regards to supplements, there's expenses with regards to peptides, the coaching or treatment expense. And then in more intensive cases, sometimes we're even using some antibiotics. So it's picking and choosing, depending on this specific case, what's going to be best for this individual. What can I shave away that might be unnecessary? Or what do they need more of? If we're seeing, if they have their gallbladder removed and we're seeing that their fat absorption is awful, well, not only are we going to need detox support, we're going to need some TUDCA, some bile salts, some gallbladder support to help pull out toxins. Because without the bile salts, you're not moving the toxins anywhere. And in more intensive cases, we might need to add in binders, like we talked about, to help bind to the toxins or bacteria and pull them out of the body. So it's really just deciphering how aggressive we need to be. But I would say that the pillars of that structure, detox support, immune support, inflammatory support, those are all pretty consistent. You can't go wrong doing those items.
That makes sense because we're all exposed to stuff all the time anyway. So it doesn't hurt anything to support those systems.
Yeah. And of course, we've talked about kind of the preemptive preparation phases, but the post protocol is also important. Once you're done committing basically mass genocide in your body, you need to replenish and repair. And that's another mistake people make, low FODMAP dieting, but they just stay on that for life. They never actually bring back food diversity and balance the gut and understand that you need those things. You need some higher fiber and prebiotics and a good balancing act. And sometimes you need to continue healing, leaky gut, the bacterial infections and everything is what's causing leaky gut. So even after you get rid of those things, you still need time to heal ulcers and that mucosal lining. So even after the treatment is done, some people will benefit from continued immune support, inflammation support, things of that nature.
That makes a lot of sense. And obviously it depends on the severity too.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, I tell people all the time, you didn't get into this overnight. We're not going to get out of this overnight. If you've had something for 20 years, we're talking about a crash course in reversing disease over 3 or 4 months. There might be some lingering stuff for a 5th month. Like, come on, don't just dive right back into your bad lifestyle as soon as we get you better. Keep giving the body grace and keep allowing that immune system to regulate and calm down. Some people need time even after a treatment.
Yeah, and it makes sense. Same thing with like body composition change. If you've been overweight for most of your life, it's not going to change in 3 months. It's probably going to take at least a couple of years.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. And do you have a lot of clients that come to you because their like body composition just won't change? Is that like a trigger for a lot of people?
Yeah, weight loss resistance is probably one of the most common things we run into, particularly coming from coaches. So like coaches like yourself or coaching teams, when they just have really stubborn cases, because I'm sure as you can imagine, not everyone just buys into getting comprehensive blood work, comprehensive GI testing. They're like, nah, I'm good. I don't need that stuff. So you might be working with someone for 6 or 8 months before it even comes around that you can be like, look, we've tried everything, I really want you to get some blood work done so we can see what's going on. And then finally we get that blood work done and it's red flag, red flag, red flag, red flag. And that's where we start having this conversation of, hey, you know that weight loss resistance that you had? It's 20 pounds of inflammation. And that's why diet and exercise isn't getting rid of it. Or you know that weight that comes on and off every time you take a GLP-1? It's not fat. It's inflammation. You don't gain and lose 10 pounds of fat in a week. Come on, guys. This is inflammation coming off and coming back on. And so I think everyone who actually is benefiting a ton from GLP-1s, meaning the metabolically diseased people, they all have stealth infections. Clear as day. Clear as day.
Well, it makes sense too, because when you're overweight and you're struggling with losing the weight, you probably have a lot of systemic inflammation, which makes your stress bucket smaller. Yes. So your body can't handle normal processes as well because it's compromised. So the probability of you having issues is really, really high.
Yeah. Yeah. And once someone gets to a point of legitimate insulin resistance, it's just a snowball cascade. You know, the stress and inflammation is causing the insulin resistance, but now the insulin resistance is causing a lot more stress and inflammation. And what do those people do? Exercise harder, diet harder, causing more stress and inflammation, once again, making it worse. And they're just stuck in this vicious cycle, digging that hole deeper and deeper. And the worst part about insulin resistance is your blood sugar is constantly high, so you're never getting into a fat burning zone. There's that. But because the insulin is so high, you're also 2 to 3 times more likely to store fat. So you're a fat storage machine that can't burn fat. It's the worst possible scenario for a lot of these people. Then, no matter what they're doing with their efforts, they go into the doctor and they get gaslit and say, well, stop eating. Exercise more and eat less. Worst advice possible for them. And again, I hope people don't take this home and say, I don't have to exercise or eat less, but there's context there. If you've already done those things for a while and it's not working, it's time to look elsewhere.
Yeah. I will say, like, a lot of my listeners are probably type A, like myself. Yeah. Like, so I don't think they would ever stop exercising. So usually like clients that I get, I have to reduce the amount because they're doing too much and it's causing systemic inflammation and poor recovery and stuff. So thankfully, I don't think that'll be a problem.
Yeah. No, it's funny. I mean, we run into the same thing, obviously, because we work with so many physique athletes and stuff. So and most people who work with me can back this up. In many cases like that, the very first thing I do is say, okay, in week 1, no exercise. I make them take a full 7 days off from exercise. And they freak out. I'm going to get so fat. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And the irony is their sleep improves, their digestion improves, their energy improves, and they lose weight. Crazy how that works. And then they'll be like, oh, but I'm not hungry. I'm eating too much. Really? You lost 5 pounds. I don't think you're eating too much.
Yeah. And I'm sure, like, with physique too, specifically, like, everybody who competes in that, you would hope, loves to train and stuff, and that's probably their crutch for a lot of things. So
coping mechanisms, and we all have them. We all do, whether it's wine at night or exercise or whatever, scrolling, whatever it may be. But we also have to understand that anything overdone can be bad. Too much Tylenol can be bad. Too much exercise can be bad. Too much heroin can be bad. Too much of anything can be bad. And a lot of people are trying to cope through their stress by adding more stress. I mean, it doesn't work that way.
Yep. I see that a lot. I was one of them until I hired my coach.
The funny thing about most functional coaches and functional practitioners, we've been through it all. We've all been super fucked up, and that's why we're so educated. And we're literally trying to save people from making the same mistakes that we did. They just don't know it yet.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. So, what what favorite like of these? I mean, probably you have mostly competitors. What was your favorite like client case? I guess that you've encountered or helped somebody through.
Yeah, that's a good question. I have some really good ones. I would say to date, my favorite one was a few years ago working with a young female client. It was actually, it was the girlfriend to a friend of mine. He was an online coach, and his girlfriend was having quite a few problems. She had narcolepsy.
Oh,
And so she had narcolepsy. She was on a lot of Adderall and stimulants just to basically get her through the day. She was also on hormonal birth control, and she had some digestive issues. And so when we connected for the first time ever, because she was only like 23, I had her do comprehensive blood work. And the very first thing I found is her adrenals were shot. She had like a 7 cortisol.
wow.
So I said to her very early on, hey, I don't know if you have narcolepsy. I think you just have severe adrenal fatigue. And they're just blasting you with methamphetamines and stimulants, not actually fixing the problem. And it doesn't help that you're on birth control, and at 23, you have 0 sex hormones. So that's not helping either. And your gut is probably a wreck. She had one of the worst GI maps I'd ever seen. She had over
Wow.
26 different high levels of infections, parasites, H. pylori, SIBO, candida, you name it. She also had mycotoxin exposure. And what was interesting was, as we started working through it, it intrigued her mom so much. Her mom decided to get testing through us, and her mom had almost an identical GI map, which means most of those things were passed mother to child in the womb.
Wow.
Parasites, H. pylori, SIBO, everything. And
That's crazy.
so going through that treatment, we fixed the mom, we fixed the daughter. 6 months later, 0 Adderall and stimulants, and she completed college with no narcolepsy.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. And
Yeah,
that's
a cool
that's
case.
really really good to know about the passing the I mean it makes sense like gut microbes to your child.
Yeah, you share microbiomes.
Yeah.
Viral
Wow.
load, any type of infections are going to be passed mother to child.
That makes sense like you were saying with the Lyme disease and
Yep.
other.
That's a
Okay.
conversation that does not have whatsoever healthy mothers, healthy babies. And that's not attacking mothers by any means, but with functional pediatricians, those are things that they're talking about. And when you meet really good functional pediatricians, they're working with women 6 months before they even start trying to get pregnant. And it's not just optimizing the fertility aspect, it's the immune system, it's detox system, it's making sure they're going to have enough folate and everything to prevent any neurological issues or immune compromisation issues for their child. So it's a long-term investment setting themselves up for success.
That's awesome. Do they work
Yeah.
with the husbands as well?
Sometimes it needs to, if needed,
Okay. Yeah, cuz we want to have children, but I had issues and he's having issues and we're like
Yeah.
we got to get healthy first.
Very true.
Okay. Cool. That supports our belief set.
Yeah. Let's have those chats after you guys get through your next round of treatments, and we can talk about that for both of you. The funny thing is, we obviously offer fertility support through peptides and whatnot at the clinic, but there have been so many cases over the years where accidentally we helped a couple get pregnant simply by just getting her and him healthy.
Healthy. Yep.
I
Yep.
actually had a case of chronic Lyme disease last year. It was a male, and he could not get his sperm going no matter what. And he was spending
Wow.
thousands of dollars on peptides to get his sperm going. He came completely off TRT. He felt like total trash for like 7 months. And he also kept getting GI issues. And I had taken this guy through like 3 treatments, and
Wow.
definition of insanity at that point. I was like, buddy, look, something else is going on. There is no way I'm just taking you through another treatment. We have to look deeper. Sure enough, Lyme disease.
That's crazy. Now I'm like thinking of all my clients, and I'm like, I wonder if you guys have these things.
It's crazy. As I learned more about stealth infections, there would be nights that I reflect and I'd be like, that's why she never got better. And I can literally think back. It almost makes you want to like contact people like from 5 years ago and be like, how are you doing these days? Do you still need help?
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I actually ran into a former client, and I was telling her about like my husband's mold situation and stuff.
Yeah.
And she's like, I grew up in a print shop, and I was in there all day of all hours of the day. And I was like, you should probably get tested for mycotoxins just to see, So hopefully she does.
Yeah. Yeah.
But pretty crazy.
Totally. And the worst part about the mold situation, and I don't know if you've actually heard this be said yet, but a lot of people brush it off as, well, there's mold everywhere. There's nothing we can do about it.
Yep.
But that goes back to our original statement. Humans have never been this immunocompromised, have never had this much difficulty detoxing before. So yes, there may be mold everywhere, but there's not toxic forms of mold everywhere, and our bodies are not capable of handling it. And so oftentimes I'll take people through treatment and they'll say, well, what happens if I get this again? Do I just can I never be exposed? And the answer is, once we fix you, if we've regulated the systems, your resiliency should be that much better. And you should be able to handle these burdens slightly better to where you don't just relapse.
Yeah, and that makes sense, which is why detox and immune system support are needed.
You got it.
Yep. That's a perfect place to leave the episode. But is there any other final message you'd like to leave the audience with?
I'll just say this, if you've tried everything else, it may be worth exploring the idea of self-infections, but I'd be cautious with going back to the statement of, test, don't guess. A big issue I see, especially with parasite cleanses, that's such like an eye roll.
Yes.
Movement, it's kind of like detox teas. Parasite cleanses are up there with detox teas. 1 supplement, 2 supplements, that doesn't fix disease. You have to do a comprehensive treatment regulating all the systems. Otherwise, you're never going to get anywhere. And so, yes, like we've said, it is an investment of time, money, and energy. But what a worthwhile investment to actually fix yourself and remediate that disease and move on with your life. And so time flies these days. 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, it's
nothing. Yeah.
Look at we're already in summer of 2026. You guys are going to do this treatment and be good by Thanksgiving. So if you're thinking you have these issues, start with comprehensive testing. And if you can't get comprehensive testing, find someone who can get it for you. Stop expecting your insurance to pay for your health care.
They will not.
I'm very upset for you. They're never going to pay for you. They're never going to help you. Their job is to avoid paying for you and to avoid getting the testing to show you what's wrong so that they don't have to pay for you. So if you want really good health care, you're most likely going to be paying out of pocket. You just need to accept that. But you can cut through the bullshit and get your answers by working with, qualified functional professionals.
Yes. Yeah, second that. Which is why, I'm so glad that I found you guys, because it's an easy referral.
Sure.
If it's out of my scope, I have no idea. I'm like, hey, here's Ryze.
Sure. Absolutely. And I'm glad that we're able to be here for you.
Yeah. So where can our listeners find you and connect with Ryze and Pure Factor?
Yeah, absolutely. So my best place to find me is on Instagram, and my personal Instagram is _M Cusano. And obviously, you can follow the business pages, Ryze Health and Wellness, and Pure Factor Formulations. If anyone would be interested in doing a consultation with me, I do offer 15-minute free discovery calls. So you don't have to buy into anything. You could just kind of hear me out and decide this guy's crazy or I really want to work with this guy. So if you want to just reach out for a discovery call, my email is matt@ryzehrt.com.
Cool. I will put all of that in the show notes. And thank you so much for being on the podcast and sharing this information.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. I learned a lot, and I know that the listeners definitely learned a lot too. So you're more than welcome to come back anytime to talk about any other topics.
Great. I look forward to it.
Awesome. And if you guys listening to the episode have learned something, it's been beneficial to you if you could rate the show, share the show, or subscribe to the podcast. This just helps get this information in front of more people, which is the goal of the show, because this is not common knowledge. Like, I had never heard of stealth infections before until I spoke with Matt. And so I think more and more people, now that I'm thinking about the clients that I've had that have struggled, they probably have one of these 4 things contributing to that. So please share this episode, get this information in front of more people.
Yeah.
And again, thank you guys for listening, and I'll catch you on the next one.